It's the second day of the 2019 Tax Indaba taking place at the Sandton Convention Centre. The spotlight has been shifted from the South African Revenue Service to the mining sector. Our reporter Mbalenhle Mthethwa is there. Mbalenhle, a very good afternoon once again. Over to you.
Good afternoon, Nzinga. One of the other things that was discussed at today's day 2 of the Tax Indaba is the Africa Free Trade Agreement. And basically, this is an agreement that was ratified by 27 African states in Kigali, Rwanda. And this is an agreement that promises to boost economic trade among African countries and boost the economies of various economic states. However, there are some barriers to the success of this agreement. We've heard experts talking about how some withholding tax and the taxes that are imposed on goods are going to be an impediment to the success of the implementation of this Africa Free Trade Agreement. But to tell me more about those taxes and how they will potentially affect the implementation and the success of the Africa Free Trade Agreement, I am joined by Dorothy Kang'oro, who is an executive director at AfriLaw. This is a tax and law consulting firm. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak to us. This Africa Free Trade Agreement is a great opportunity for African states and definitely for economic development and for economic growth. Please tell us more about how these taxes are an impediment to this agreement.
So I think because the premise is that the African Free Trade Agreement will allow for the free movement of goods, persons, and people, and across the borders, the main issue is that there may be tariff barriers, which are your customs duties, your import taxes. And then, like you rightfully said, there is concern that there are other non-tariff barriers, which are the withholding taxes. Each country has a slew of withholding taxes that they pay, that they impose when one is making payments to non-residents, different rates for different services. Then, of course, there's a different tax base, direct taxes, the corporate taxes. So there will be a lot of work that will be needed to make sure that the tax systems are harmonized. I mean, some work has been done, obviously, by the regional bodies. And so you can see the East African community having their own harmonization processes in place, SADC, COMESA. So some work has been done, but still quite a lot of work to go before we get that free movement going.
So with regards to harmonization, how does this impact? I know during our conversations before we started the crossing, you spoke about tax evasion, and how does harmonization, how will that affect coordinating,
exactly.
Basically?
So, and which is the challenge, and which is why you may see some countries hesitant to ratify the Free Trade Agreement, because tax has always been a competency of the one jurisdiction. It has never been shared, say, within many countries. So tax authorities have different capacities. Some are highly skilled, some have lots of infrastructure available to them. They use ICT to their betterment, while others are just beginning the long journey of harmonizing their systems for a global market. So the single market, which means freedom of movement of goods, means they must act in concert with each other, so that they have to know which goods are going through and coming out of the single market, coming in, because duties will only be paid in one country, and then it can go through all the other countries that are members of AFTA who have signed on to it without paying any taxes. Needless to say, that means there are loopholes for tax evasion. So the corporate governance issues that the tax authorities have been facing across Africa have to be addressed. They have to tighten their processes. Otherwise, there's a risk that they may lose critical revenues, which they need, obviously, to meet their development goals. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. That was Dorothy Kang'oro telling us about how governments will need to work together in order to avoid instances of tax evasion during the implementation of this Africa Free Trade Agreement. One of the other people that I spoke to, they spoke about this withholding tax and how it actually has accounted for 50% of GDP in certain countries. And she flagged this as one of the biggest impediments to the success of this agreement, which promises to obviously stimulate the African economy and grow the African economy. But for now, Nzinga, it's back to you in studio.